What's up guys, my name is Lucas Ambrosio and today I'll be showing you how I took this photo from this to this using dodge and burn. Dodge and burn is a technique where you darken and lighten specific areas of the image. Today we're going to be doing local dodge and burn and global dodge and burn. Local dodge and burn is used to even out the transitions between shadows and highlights, so it gives the photo a bit of a smoother look, not so patchy. And the global dodge and burn is used to add depth and contour. You will achieve better results if you dodge and burn after you are done cleaning up the skin, removing the blemishes and the distractions. So let's start the dodge and burning process. First of all, come down here and let's create a curves adjustment layer. Double click on the layer and let's name it dodge. Double click so you can get this box. And then let's lighten the image. Select the midtones area and bring it up. But we don't want this to affect the whole image, and so we're going to click on the mask and press Command or Control I. When it comes to masks, it's important to remember that black conceals and white reveals. So since I made this mask black, none of the things, the curves won't be affecting the photo, only on the areas that I paint white. But I'll show you how to do that later. Now I'll create another curves adjustment layer and I'll call this one burn. Double click so I can darken the image now. Dodge is to lighten, burn is to darken. About here should be fine. And then I'll select the mask again and press Command or Control I to invert it. Great. Now I'll select the burn and the dodge layer by pressing Command or Control and clicking on both of them. And then I'll group them together by pressing Command or Control G. I'll double click on the group and I'll call this local. I did not mean to do that. Local DMB. Okay, great. I'm using a Wacom tablet, which I highly recommend if you want to step up your retouching game. So I'm going to come up here, Window, Brush, and you want to make sure on Brush, Shape Dynamics, Size Jitter, the control says Pen Pressure. And then you want to come down here to Transfer, and then you want to make sure the Opacity Jitter says Pen Pressure and Flow Jitter Pen Pressure as well. You also want to select Build Up and Smoothing. If you're using a mouse, you don't need to select the transfer. Okay, I'm going to be using a white brush, because remember, white reveals, black conceals. And then I'll be painting the areas that I need to work on. But right now it's a bit difficult to see what I really need to do. So we're going to create a visual aid to make it easier on our eyes. So I'm going to start by creating a solid color layer, and then I'll make sure it's white. Click OK. And now I'm going to change the layer blending mode to color. I'll double click on this layer and call it Desaturate. Now to add a bit more contrast, I'm going to create another curves adjustment layer. I'll call it Aid. Okay, great. And with this Aid layer, depending on the photo that I'm working on, I will switch between the blending modes Multiply and Screen. But this can be quite intense, so you can adjust the opacity depending on how much contrast you want to add to the image to show you the imperfections you need to work on. I will start with Multiply because this image is well exposed, not a lot of areas in the shadow that I need to work on. I'm going to group these two layers together by pressing Command or Control and clicking on both of them, and then Command or Control G to group them. I will call this group Visual Aid. I'll just move this one up here because this is what it should look like when I'm done. Right, so now that we've added more contrast, I'll probably add a little bit more. We can start dodging and burning. So I'm going to open this and I'm going to start on the dodge layer. I have a white brush. Its hardness down to 0, and the size will vary depending on the area that I'm working on. So my goal here is to brighten some of the shadows to make the tones look more even. So you can see this area here under the eye has some shadows, on the side of the mouth, over here, maybe even on the fingers here. So I don't want to be too crazy with this. I want it to build up. So I'll start with opacity 100% and flow 5%, and then I'll just make sure the mask selected, and then just paint. If you find it difficult to see the areas that you need to work on, simply increase the contrast. Just come up to this aid layer and then just increase make sure the blending mode is multiply and increase the opacity. It can be a bit tricky to see this at first, but with time you get used to it and your eyes will be more trained. But when doing this, you need to make sure you're not removing shadows that create the shape of the face. Some of the shadows are cast because of the bone structure, and if you remove those, the models can look a bit weird, a bit alien-like. If that's what you're going for, it's okay. So I'm going to show you what this is doing. Let's remove some of these here. And you're just painting away. When you first start, it's very easy to overdo this technique. So when you're doing it, make sure you zoom in and out so you can see your progress. And just take your time. I like to start working on the global parts, on the bigger parts of the image first, and then zoom in more so you can see the smaller areas. So it's a bit too dark there. I'm going to come to the aid layer and just reduce the opacity. Okay, great. Back to dodging. So what I'm doing, I'm just painting these little darker areas that shouldn't be there. Okay, so I'm going to turn the visual aid off just so you can see exactly what we did here. So I'm going to turn this on and off for you to see the difference. So before, after, before, after. And this is the local dodge and burn. This one I'm using to even the tones and the transitions between the shadows and highlights. Okay, I'm going to turn this and I'm going to increase the contrast so I can see if I need to do anything else. I like to start with dodging because sometimes if you do too much or if you go over, you can just fix it with the burning after. And you'll be constantly resizing your brush according to the areas that you're working on. And with this, you can do very little, you can do a lot. Just take into account where this photo will end up and how big people will be seeing it. If it's going to be printed big, get really close and make sure you do your dodge and burn properly. If you're just going to go on Instagram or social media, not going to be high resolution, then you don't need to pay that much attention to it. to all the small details. I like to do it, doesn't matter where the photo is going, just practice. It helps me become faster at it. Okay. So you can end up with some areas that will be like brighter than the others after dodging. So you use the burn and do the same thing. White brush, same flow, same everything, but now instead of painting the shadows, you're painting the areas that are a bit too bright. And then if you think you've overdone, you can just keep going back and forth between these two until you have the look that you want. Right, zoom out. I'm going to hide this visual aid and let's see what it looks like. Before, after, before, after. It's a very subtle effect. You want the photo to look natural. Right, so I'm pretty much done with the local dodge and burn. There's not a lot to do with her hand or the rest of her body. So now we're doing the global dodge and burn. This part is used to add more depth and contour the face of the models. So creating these layers is very similar to the previous one. So curves adjustment layer, name it dodge by double clicking, and then you bring this up. Select the mask, Command or Control I. Now I'm going to create another one. Bring this down. Double click to name it, burn. Click on the mask, Command or Control I to invert it. Now we're going to create a 50% gray layer, which I like to use to add more highlight to the image. So to do that, we press Command or Control, Shift and N. They'll bring up this box. You're going to name this layer Highlights. The layer blending mode would be Soft Light, and you would need to check this box. Fill with soft light, neutral color, 50% gray. So these three layers, we select them by pressing Shift, and then, or you can just press Command and then just select them individually, and then Command or Control G to group them, and we call this group Global D and B. Okay, so global dodge and burn is a bit more subtle, so I'm going to reduce the flow to probably 2%. And what I'm going to be doing here is enhancing the highlights that are already present in the image. I will focus on the face. So I just identify where the highlights are. So here on the nose, right here on the lip, on the chin a little bit, on the cheek. So we'll be constantly changing the brush size depending on the area they're working on. Here on the nose, and we just paint away. Now burn. When I burn, I'm enhancing the shadows that already exist. So I'm going to come here on the cheekbones, the other side. And now I'm going to use the highlights layer to increase the highlights even more. So start here on the lips. You don't want to go too crazy with this one because you affect it differently and it's a bit harsher than the curves layer. So I'm going to toggle this on and off for you to see the difference. And that is pretty much it. So I'm going to show you the before and after so you can see. So this is what we started with after I cleaned up the skin, the local dodge and burn, to even the transitions between shadows and highlights and make it look cleaner, and then the global dodge and burn to contour the image. And here's the before and after. So that is it. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you'd like to see more videos like this, please subscribe and give this video a like.